The U.S. economy added 431,000 jobs last month, despite high inflation and, of course, fears of a recession. Now, notably, more women did return to the job market. The labor force participation rate for prime-age female workers jumped to 76.5%, and that's the highest level we've seen since February of 2020.
Okay, so clearly there's progress, but the U.S. still lags behind peer countries in jobs recovery for women. A lack of affordable childcare and elder care has prevented many from re-entering the workforce. So our next guest's mission is to help women reach their financial and professional goals. Sallie Krawcheck is the CEO of and co-founder of Ellevest, which is a digital investing platform built by women for women. And Ellevest announcing today it closed a $53 million round of funding. Sallie, welcome back to Quicktake. Congratulations on the funding.
Thank you.
I want to start there actually, because any entrepreneur knows that raising money from investors like venture capitalists can be something of a grind. And you've mentioned this in one of your tweets. And you've gone through a couple of these financing rounds. Does it get easier with time?
Oh, it's a horrible. And there's actually a Series B cliff. So much, there's been money that's come into seed and Series A to back women investors. But when you get to Series B, even though it should be all about the numbers, and even though there's research saying that women CEOs tend to have good performance, some studies show better performance than men CEOs at the startup level. When you get to Series B, there's a cliff, and women raise just 1% of Series B dollars. And over in my area, fintech, 1% of fintech dollars. You do that combination, it's 1 in 10,000.
Well, the convenient explanation for those numbers, Sallie, is that people like to invest in people that look like them. So a lot of men like to invest in other men, especially white men. How often are you the only woman in the room, though?
Oh, and look, I grew up on Wall Street, so it's been forever. And what we did with the other raises and with this raise is saying, look, we see these numbers, we think we'll go the institutional route. We did, it was going good. But then we actually had women starting to talk to women about it. And then we had some women venture capitalists call us up and say, I'd like to put together a special purpose vehicle of women and underrepresented investors. And then a woman in that, I'd like to put together one too, and so on. And so what we found really works is not going to people who have money and convincing them of our worldview, but going to people who have our worldview and are building the world we want to see, and then having them invest. So I think this is unprecedented. In this Series B round, 90% of our investors are women and underrepresented investors, and 2/3 of the capital came from them as well. I think pretty unheard of.
That is super encouraging, and I really like how you refined your strategy as you went along. But going along the process meant that you faced a lot of no's throughout the pitch process. And you tweeted about this, in which at least 3 investors said no. One guy said his VC friends didn't like Ellevest and asked you to explain why that was, which I thought was a really strange question. Then there was someone in Florida who had pledged, $5 million and then canceled or backed out at the last minute. And then you also encountered a woman who made it very clear that she does not back other women. Can you just walk us through some of what people were telling you?
Yeah, tons of fun. And all with, by the way, terrific results, terrific financial results that we've been seeing. The one that, that really upset me, but then I became empathetic towards, was the woman who said, look, I have made it to here. I'm essentially the only woman in the room. I've done my work, and I want to invest the same way everybody else did in young sort of Mark Zuckerbergs. And at first, I really was hurt by that. And then I realized that as the only woman in the room, she was facing the same kind of pressures that women entrepreneurs face, that she stands out, that she's held to a higher standard, and began to realize that her investing in Ellevest was probably a career bet to really go out there and invest in another woman, as opposed to investing in what others invested in. And so I think the answer is not just getting some women into venture capital, it's getting a lot of women into venture capital.
It's a good reminder for me to be extra grateful, as I always am, of being in the room with Scarlet, because she has invested so much in me selflessly.
And talking to guests like Sallie.
And yes, and talking with guests like you. I'm curious about some stats regarding your tagline, Sallie, which is that more money in the hands of women is never a bad thing. And we're interestingly starting to see that for women under 30 in a lot of the biggest cities in the U.S., they're actually out-earning their peers. Young men are increasingly living at home longer, increasingly not graduating college at the rates that young women are. To me, these stats seem like a win for your company, that women are going to start to really own the economy more and more in the years to come. To what extent do you include information like that in your pitch to men, or does that turn the boys off?
No, and first of all, being for women doesn't mean being against men. And when I talk to men, I say, look, do you want your daughter to live a smaller life than your son? Because if she has less money, she will. Do you want her stuck in a relationship that is abusive? Do you want her stuck in a job that she hates when your son can leave? Because that's what happens today, because women have just 32 cents of wealth for every dollar that a white man has. For Black women, it's a penny. And so it restricts what women are able to do. So it's not being against men. It's helping to raise women, and in particular our daughters, up so that we can live fuller lives. And the research shows that means the economy grows. That means societies are fairer. That means their families are better off. That means nonprofits are better off. And it is a lot about earning more at work, but very importantly, and this is where Ellevest uniquely comes in, it's about putting that money to work. Because what women have been hurt by is they haven't invested as much as men, and so haven't had the power of compounding, and they've had more debt than men, and so they've had the negative impact of compounding. That's why the gender wealth gap has been widening.
Yeah, and of course, like you mentioned, the pay gap is still alive and well, but we are seeing that slight rebalancing of the scales start to happen in some areas, again, bigger cities. Project that out for us. What will be the single biggest impact of some of the narrowing of the pay gap on the investing industry in the years to come?
Well, I think on the economy overall, we all know that the biggest growth that we ever saw in the U.S. economy was when women came into the workforce post-World War II. Women are being held out of the workforce today, not because they want to be, but because of no infrastructure. The quote of the pandemic was Jessica Calarco. What we learned is that other countries have social safety nets and the U.S. has women. And so it did crack me up because as the recovery was going a little slowly and women weren't coming back out, people were like, what could it be? What is the reason? I'm so confused. It's like, because we still hold the traditional gender roles. So again, part of the mission of Ellevest, get more money in the hands of women. First of all, money is women's number one source of stress. Number one, taking action, investing with an Ellevest, putting together a financial plan with an Ellevest is the number one driver in the confidence in her future. Money is power too, and so when she's making more money, investing more money, that gives her a stronger foundation, because right now she's got to depend on herself as opposed to the social safety net, which is pretty ragged.
Yeah, absolutely, and I love the way you put that. You know, you referenced earlier how you grew up on Wall Street, so you're more than just any entrepreneur, especially a younger one who, you know, might be just starting off in terms of forming her own company. You are a Wall Street veteran, former CEO of Sanford C. Bernstein, as well as Smith Barney, the former CFO of Citigroup. How do you think that works for you and against you as you try to spread the word of Ellevest?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I do think about this. On the one hand, I know a lot of people. I can get a meeting. We have such great numbers at Ellevest. We have such a compelling story. On the other hand, we're not Bitcoin, we're not crypto. You know, when the fintech market was so hot, it was really so hot for those, you know, go this way and then maybe that way, as opposed to a company going this way. And I'd say the other thing is, you know, not a lot of venture capitalists were, you know, who do I want to invest in? Well, think. Oh, right, a middle-aged former CFO of Citigroup. That's the ideal, you know, driven venture capitalist. And so I've been underestimated my whole life. And even, you know, in this last round, I would get is this, you know, sort of something you do on the side? Is this, you know, a vanity thing? And as my husband will tell you, it is 140% of my time, because what we're doing is so important. And by the way, because we've got investors like Melinda Gates, like Penny Pritzker, like Rethink Impact, we've got such a great roster of investors, getting them the returns from Ellevest so that they can reinvest in other women is all consuming. It's all consuming.
I wonder, Sallie, if we can stick on this for a second. And I know it's probably, I can imagine, a little frustrating to have to keep talking about the challenges you've faced, but I am just really curious, of those rooms you've been in throughout your career, Which did you find to be the hardest to be taken seriously in, and how did you overcome it?
Okay, I'll tell you. I was in one meeting with a well-known venture capitalist going through what we were doing in Ellevest and describing how our goal is to be there for eventually all things for women from college to crypt, and talking about how she starts off in digital investing and then moves through to where, we offer financial planners, career coaches, and private wealth advisors, financial advisors. And so we've got women investing pennies with us literally, and millions and millions and millions of dollars. And I was describing adding more financial advisors. And this man started to tell me what financial advisors are like, what their personalities are, and what the financials of the business are. And it was such a difficult moment because I thought, am I having a stroke?
Right.
Like, does he, do I have to say, do you know what I used to do? Did you read my bio, or do you just think you know more than I do? And so that was probably, there are moments of tears and all that stuff. When that woman passed, that was a moment in which strangely water started leaking out of my eye, bizarrely. I don't know what that was, but that was such a hard moment, because you're just like, why
am I here? What is this going? Why is this happening?
I don't even know how to be. And of course, as a woman, you get so negatively hit if you're rude. Mm-hmm. And so they're like, do you know who I am? Thing just doesn't work. And so I just say, so interesting. So
you really have to swallow it in that moment, right? Which is such an interesting dynamic. How did you respond?
I think I just kept going. At that point, you're like, he's not investing in us. Just let's move on out. But what I did find was you got to figure out who the decision maker is. And that for something like Ellevest, the moment when I always knew they weren't going to invest is when you found out the person in the room who was excited wasn't the decision maker, and or they asked the question, what if a competitor gets in? And not that that's a mean question or even a fair question, but when you're like, Ellevest is serving women, and that's half the population.
Right.
And nobody else has done this successfully. And we've got this kind of traction, but somehow there's only room for one when there are dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of multi-billion-dollar worth companies in fintech, wealth management, asset management, who have the majority of their clients are men. But somehow there can only be one for women. And when that question get asked, they may be really well-meaning, but you just say they've got an inherent expectation that's going to be really hard to get over, no matter how well-meaning they are.
So in hearing you describe all of this, I mean, when you're out there raising money for Ellevest and you're talking about how you're going to use this money, how you're going to expand the company, do you tailor your answers to what the male investors probably want to hear and will jump on versus female investors?
But you don't know. So we have any number of male allies, non-binary allies, who are investors in Ellevest. The company is what it is. And the company evokes emotion. It is, I would argue, one of the few fintech, new financial services companies to have a brand that evokes emotion. And happily for our community, that can be a positive emotion. I literally have had young women and women stop me on the street when they see my Ellevest bag and say, please tell the team I said thank you. I had one who said, I'm an immigrant woman. I didn't know I could invest. And she started to cry. For others, it evokes another emotion, which is feeling threatened. Oh, we also, have women as clients, and we also have technology. And so I think it depends on where they're coming from. I can't guess. And so, we want with us at Ellevest, all the women and all the non-binary individuals and men who want women to move ahead and who see that what my old industry was providing wasn't fully working for women. Just wasn't. I mean, and no surprise, the industry is mostly male, and so they built a product and service that does a better job for men. No meanness there. It just happened.
Yeah. Right, it was by design. I want to talk about what you're going to use this capital for. You've said that it's going to be used to deepen your current offerings. So you've got a variety of membership fees. You can get free workshops, an FDIC insured emergency fund, a no minimum investment account, for example, and you offer discounts to members for one-on-one coachings. The coachings are where I've noticed it gets a bit pricier. Will this funding round allow for expanded access to that one-on-one time?
We're working on all of it. And we really spend so much time engaging with our community. And they are taking us places I did not imagine we'd go. So, for example, when we did the last raise, and what kept coming back in the research that we were doing with her is, I want to earn more money at work. Help me because I trust you, Ellevest. And yeah, there's a need for that. And where do you go if you're a youngish woman or 35-year-old Black woman and you're trying to negotiate a raise? The issues you face are different than what the majority face. And so this kept coming up. And of course, I, from my old Wall Street background, said, well, you can't put those together. Of course, the team is like, let's try it. And so we're now offering it. And so we're going places that traditional financial services companies aren't. And we're going there because she's telling us what's out there doesn't work. Come with me on this journey for us to figure out what does.
You know, while we're having this conversation, I keep seeing in front of me the teleprompter. Sallie Krawcheck, co-founder of Ellevest. I keep thinking about female founders, Maddie, and how there have been a lot of shows recently on entrepreneurs, but specifically one female founder and just founders in general and some of the mistakes that they've made in the journey of building their company.
Yes, I think Scarlet has binged Dropout for us. She's been the resident employee to watch Dropout. I just binged We Crashed. Sallie, before we let you go, I just have to ask, as these shows come out about the ways in which some founders have erred, perhaps, in their funding, have you watched any of these shows, and do you have any takes on them?
I can't. Because remember, I'm a recovering research analyst. And the research tells us that women in corporate America, women entrepreneurs, women venture capitalists are held to higher standards. And so, of course, individuals, as they're building companies, make mistakes. And I'm not talking about breaking the law mistakes. I'm talking about the genre of XYZ famous woman startup is a total jerk, right? And we know it because we talk to a bunch of anonymous people who, used to work at the company. And that just hurts me when you see that, because people try to figure their way out. And it doesn't mean bad stuff wasn't done. But I think as you start to look at the number of those articles, the percent of those articles that are about women founders to the percent of women founders in total, you do that ratio, I think you're going to find we're pretty overweight. Let's take the woman founder down a peg.
Yeah, the bar is always somehow moving higher and higher. Sallie Krawcheck, really appreciate you joining us.
But when they have more money, when they all have more money, they've all got more power, and that's how we're going to change this.
There we go. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Sounds like a virtuous circle to me.
I know. Things to look forward to for sure, though. Sallie Krawcheck, CEO and co-founder of Ellevest.